Alright, so, as of the time that I'm recording this video, which is November 29th, I have all the scripts written for the last 3 videos in this particular sub-series, and I'm going to be filming them across this weekend. I don't know when they're going to get up. This video might go up on, like, December 22nd, but I'm just letting it be known, we're in the home stretch of the series. And again, I want to get through these last few videos because that'll be less weight on my shoulders, so let's jump right in. Welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And again, you could see it in the title today. I want to talk about my favorite games of 2020. You guys know how... That was my medicine alarm. That'll probably get cut from the video or something. I don't know. Sorry about that. I'll just start with the rules again. You guys know how the series goes. I talk about the year in gaming, what the landscape looked like, specifically in the console gaming sphere. I talk about some notable snubs, some big games that came out in the year that I didn't play. The just missed the cut games, which were the like 7 out of 10 games that didn't make my 2 proper lists. The cream before the crop, which were the 8 and 9 out of 10 games on my scale, and then my proper best list of 10 out of 10 games. So let's try to blow through this intro because there are a lot of games that we're going to be talking about here. Plenty, actually. 2020! The year I first entered game journalism in any capacity with my internship at the Gamer Kit. Before that all went to shit. Hey, but our YouTube videos are still online and they're a treat. Go watch them. Yes, of course, 2020. A year that many people don't want to revisit. And probably most people don't want to revisit for obvious reasons. The COVID-19 pandemic taking over the entire world, basically upending the lives of damn near everybody. I graduated college that year, so peak COVID, I graduated college from home. I finished my degree pretty much right here in my bedroom. It was, not a fun time. Though, the one area that was good in 2020. It sounds weird to say that, because 2020 was a year with a lot of bad. But one area where 2020 at least granted a bit of a reprieve was in the gaming world. At least specifically with game releases, because there were a lot of other gaming-related struggles in 2020, like some console shortages across the board that pretty much stretched into the next few years. As far as the consoles themselves, I mean, the Switch lineup in 2020 was a lot lighter, more attention paid to re-releases and whatnot, and there was also a lot of Nintendo shooting itself in the foot with its business decisions in 2020. Again, if you're a competitive Smash player, you know all about that. But there was still some excitement in the console gaming sphere to some extent, with 2020 being the year of the next generation consoles, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. And Series S. I'm probably not going to put this one here quite as much, but nevertheless, here you go. Naturally, of course, any new console comes with a bevy of hype, so the PS5 and Series X were obviously going to be huge deals, but I feel like this was the first generation where things were looking a lot different in the console sphere. Not in the sense of being super innovative, but because this is where we were really starting to see that consoles at this point in time are kind of just going to be like slightly better iterations of the last one. Slightly more powerful, they can handle slightly better graphics or slightly higher frame rates, but they're not exactly all that essential. They iterate, but don't exactly innovate. I mean, the PS5 does have the DualSense controller, which is kind of cool and can do some nice things, but doesn't seem like a lot of developers really want to use it too much. And the Series X has Xbox Game Pass and all that stuff, which is great, but you don't really even need an Xbox at this point. If you have a PC or a Fire Stick or a refrigerator, you can play your Xbox games on it. Or if you can't now, within the next few years you'll be able to. The most interesting thing to me about them was how both of them kind of did an about-face on their initial approaches. Coming into the 9th generation, or whatever it is, because at this point it's just semantics, Xbox was kind of promising that the Series X, at least in its first few years, would have a lot of cross-gen games, and that Xbox One players wouldn't really be left out in the dust quite as much. But if the launch games weren't quite on the Series X, one of the things that was happening was games that were being announced for 2 or 3 years down the line were Series X only, even though it seemed like they were going to be on Xbox One for the next few years. Meanwhile, Sony very openly was saying that they believed in generations and that they were going to do a lot of next-gen exclusive games, but with the pandemic causing console shortages and things like that, they would end up about-facing and putting a lot of the big games on the PS4. Even games like Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok were actually released on the PS4, which is kind of shocking to think about. And their overall approaches have changed in a big way throughout this generation as well. Obviously, like I said, Xbox ever since the Xbox One generation has really been bringing a lot of its first-party games straight to PC on day one. But now they're bringing a lot of their big games to PlayStation and even to Nintendo on the Switch. Meanwhile, PlayStation, while they're not doing it day and date, is kind of bringing some of their exclusives to the PC as well, so it's starting to feel like owning a console is less and less essential. Don't get me wrong, I have both, and I enjoy them both. But you don't necessarily need a console to enjoy gaming in its purest form now, which has made this generation definitely an interesting one. Let's just put it like that. As far as third-party stuff, the only things I was really able to find were that 2020 was the year of the first Summer Games Fest show, which basically expedited the whole E3 is dead thing. On a more personal and sad side, Adobe Flash got discontinued, and childhood me cried and cried and cried. And in 2020, there was a lot of huge, major misconduct allegations. It felt like 2020 was when gaming had its big Me Too moment. And it wasn't even just among development studios, like, yes, they were involved, but it also kind of involved a lot of content creators and streamers and just, like, competitive gamers and things like that. As a Smash fan, I remember that all too well. Sometimes I like to forget about it. It was kind of the thing that pushed me away from following competitive Smash for a bit, and even now has kind of kept me away from it to some extent. So yeah, 2020 was a mess. But like I said, there were actually quite a few really good games themselves, including two big ones that I didn't play. Those two big snubs that I have here were Persona 5 Royal, which I never played the original game, so why was I gonna play the updated version? And perhaps 2020's biggest game, at least in terms of like commercial popularity and things like that, Animal Crossing New Horizons. This game was huge, and with the fact that COVID kept a lot of people inside, it felt like demand for this game was even higher than it was already going to be before it came out. But again, as someone who doesn't play Animal Crossing, I was never really gonna play this game to begin with. I'm happy it's successful though. So now on to the stuff that I did play, starting with the Just Missed the Cut section. Now usually, I give some descriptions on the games in this section, but I'm actually going to save that this time around because there are 8 games here. Like I said, 2020 was a year where I played a lot of stuff. And even stuff I didn't play in 2020, I have played in the time since. So to save some time, I'm going to just blow through these games and not give any deep explanations on them. So brace yourselves. The Pedestrian, Destroy All Humans remake, Samurai Jack Battle Through Time, Vader Immortal Star Wars VR series, Tell Me Why, Star Wars Squadrons, Watch Dogs Legion, and The Pathless. Yeah, sorry, we just have way too many games to cover in this video. As a matter of fact, do I have a few remasters to blow through here? Sometimes if they're in the cream before the crop, I like to blow through them because they're just remasters of games that I've already talked about, so sure, I'll blow through a few. 2020 had SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which I suppose could have gotten a longer discussion, but all I'd end up saying is that it took the original and improved on some of the frustrating parts of it. Control Ultimate Edition, Pikmin 3 Deluxe, and I know it should go in the 10 out of 10 section, but I'll get it out of the way here, Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. Oh yeah, and I guess I'll mention the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection here. I could have saved it and gone on a tangent about how Nintendo really screwed the pooch with this thing, but I'll just say that all these games are incredible and do play well on the Switch, so it's worth grabbing if you can find a copy at a good price. Anyway, on to the proper cream before the crop, and again, my apologies if these entries aren't the longest, I just don't really want to be here forever. Yes, I'm kicking off this section with a mod. Hell, this mod might have actually worked in the 2019 video because that's when the first version of it came out, but you know what? 2020 was so upside down that I'm gonna have this one. Project Plus, if you don't know, is basically a successor to the Super Smash Bros. Brawl mod Project M, which I talked about in my 2011 video. That mod basically gave Brawl the melee physics and whatnot, and this release improved the balance while adding a boatload of content. There's like 3 pages worth of stages, and each stage has 4 variants, which is insane. Every character, on top of having a bunch of new costumes, has some hidden costumes to use, which is kind of crazy. And there's even a wholly new playable character here who wasn't playable in any of the other Smash games. Knuckles. Knuckles was supposed to show up in a Project M update, but once they stopped development of that game, those plans kind of just went away. So it's awesome to see they actually got him in the game now. And even now, after playing it so much, I'm still finding new stuff, and it's utterly incredible how much they were able to pack into this one. It would have easily been a 10 if it wasn't prone to crashes, but nevertheless, this is a great mod and a huge improvement on an already great mod in Project M. Honestly, looking back, it's kind of crazy that Capcom dropped Resident Evil 2 Remake in 2019 and then just happened happened to have this remake locked and loaded a year later. And then a year after that was an actual full-blown brand new Resident Evil game in 2021. And what's the craziest is that all of them were good. Sure, Resident Evil 3 Remake was probably the weakest of the bunch, but I still got a crap ton of longevity out of this one. Much like RE2 Remake, this got re-released on Xbox Game Pass earlier this year, so I recently replayed it, and I still love it just as much. I do understand why some others weren't as crazy about it, especially if you were someone who played the original version of the game and saw how much was in there that wasn't in this remake. But as someone who didn't, I just enjoyed what this one did. I like how it played nicely into what made RE2 Remake work, while continuing to bring more of the great tense atmosphere that made that game's scares so effective. And sure, maybe Nemesis isn't quite Mr. X, but I found him compelling, and I didn't mind the overall shorter nature of the game. I sometimes prefer shorter games because that gives me more reason to want to replay them later on, so I wasn't too bothered by this game being so quick. It may not be RE2 Remake, but RE3 Remake is still great fun, and definitely worth a play if you're looking for a quick, scary, good time. Perhaps the last big PlayStation 4 exclusive before the beginning of the next gen. Some of you might be surprised that this isn't in my proper best list, because for a lot of you, this was like the game of the year for 2020. And truth be told, I did have some issues with Ghost of Tsushima, specifically related to its open world, but don't let that fool you. Ghost of Tsushima is a great game. I love the way it pays tribute to Japanese culture, and especially to the classic, iconic works of director Akira Kurosawa. The combat is incredibly precise and very fluid, and as I'm sure many are going to tell you, and have already told you, this is probably one of the most beautiful looking games you're gonna find today. Down to the littlest details, it looks superb, and I love the incredible cinematography here as well. And it's supremely cool that they added a black and white Kurosawa filter to make it look even more like his classic films. Even if it's not my favorite thing Sony's done, it's a testament to how strong their PS4 library was that this isn't my favorite game of the bunch. And yeah, I still stand by that PS5 director's cut was very unnecessary, and I personally just kind of liked the Iki Island expansion, didn't really love it. But otherwise, great game, and I'm definitely excited to see what Sony does with Ghost of Yotei next year. Apparently, it's going to actually be improving the open world, which is music to my ears. Another rare moment where I'm actually going to be talking about a live service game. I've said before that live service games are things I often turn and run away from at Sonic the Hedgehog speed, but Fall Guys actually launched on PS Plus and threw me for quite a loop. A race-to-the-finish type platformer with survival challenges and an adorable, colorful graphical style? Sure. I'll jump in. And there was a point where this game really took over a lot of my time because I just couldn't get enough of it. And also because when I was at that internship at the Gamer Kit, I got messed with for never winning a match at a point, so I went and got one. And then started winning more because I'm petty like that. But this is still a game I actually play quite often with my friends because it's just that fun and easy to get into, especially compared to the typical Battle Royale game. This game is very easy to get into, but still tough to master, and I think the chaotic nature of it makes it quite fun, even when you lose. Especially with how much they've added to it since its initial release. The new mini-games that they've continued to add in the later seasons have just made it such a joy. It's just such a unique flavor for the genre, and even if the hype has dipped a touch since its COVID-era peak, it's still an easy game to recommend, especially now that it's on multiple platforms, is free to play, and has crossplay. Even if online multiplayer isn't your thing, give Fall Guys a chance. It's got way too much charm and chaos to pass up on. Here's one that just got on this list relatively recently. I first came across Ghost Runner a couple years ago when it came to PS Plus, and at first play, I dropped it. It was an incredibly cool game, I just sucked at it, and I didn't feel like putting up with the challenge. I know. Make your jokes. But then pretty recently I heard they added some accessibility features to make it just a touch easier to deal with, so I gave it another chance, and I'm very glad I did. This is a really great game. It's a super stylish first-person action game that kind of gives me a Mirror's Edge vibe, what with its emphasis on fast-paced traversal, but with obviously more challenge and more of a cyberpunk aesthetic to it as well. That traversal, though, is super satisfying, and the combat is sick, and it makes the game plenty of fun overall. Yes, even with the accessibility settings, the challenge can be frustrating to deal with since the game is very trial and error focused, but all in all, Ghost Runner is a very good game. Stick with it and I think you will be rewarded. And no, I haven't beaten Ghost Runner 2 because the game doesn't have assist modes and I suck at it. Sorry. Okay, so this is technically a re-release that I could have lumped in with the others or talked about in the previous year, but technically I never played Tetris Effect in its original form, so to speak, so let's just talk about it here. Now, Tetris Effect was first released in 2018 on PS4 and PC, but by 2020 it got this new version here, Tetris Effect Connected, and it got an Xbox release, and later Switch as well, and eventually PlayStation. Fitting to it essentially being a celebration of Tetris, it was even named after the psychological effect known as Tetris Effect, where playing puzzle games like Tetris for a really long time starts affecting your thoughts, your dreams, and other non-Tetris related activities. I once had something like that with Nonogram. That game took over my life in 2019. Now, Tetris Effect Connected showed up on my radar because it was on Game Pass, and it came at a time when I was really getting onto a pretty strong puzzle game kick, especially a strong Tetris kick. And look, I know what you're thinking. It's Tetris. How much more can you improve Tetris? And to an extent, you're right, but that doesn't make this game any less worth it. From a gameplay perspective, the new zone ability that allows players to stop time to clear more than 4 lines at once is honestly incredible. And beyond that, I love how they were able to make it challenging but still accessible. And visually, the game is a real treat. I never thought I would want to see Tetris turned into an art form, but that's basically what they did here. And it looks stunning without distracting from the gameplay, which is awesome. This is gaming in its purest form, and even if you've played Tetris a billion times before, I still recommend trying this out. And I still got to try the VR side of the game. I've heard so much about it, and I never got to play it myself, so I definitely got to see what it's all about. Okay, sorry, I couldn't resist. Thank you, Caro Benito. But yes, the first of a few PS5 launch games we'll be talking about here, though I already mentioned the Pathless, if that counts. And this one came in as a highlight from Sony's PS5 reveal event in June 2020, though not for the same reasons as some of the show's other games. Where games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart rode in on a wave of hype as potential next-gen showcases, Bugsnax came in on hype because it just looks so goofy and memey. I mean, what do you expect from the developers of Octodad Dadliest Catch? But it was an easy one to jump into because it was a day one PS Plus game, so I chose to give it a shot, and I was very surprised. Beyond its bizarre, memey concept, Bugsnax has a very thoughtful story that has a lot of heart, a lot of charm, and even more maturity than you might expect out of a game involving food bug hybrid creatures. The puzzle-based gameplay is also quite enjoyable and has some clever twists and turns here and there to make it worthwhile. Oh, and this is a minor thing, but this game actually made me a believer in 3D audio as a technology, because when a bunger chases after you, it's absolutely terrifying. I actually felt a chill up my spine when it happened. It was crazy. It stands up there with actual horror games that I've played. I'm not kidding. Nowadays, you can find Bugsnax on really any system, but I definitely recommend the PS5 version thanks to the faster load times, or should I say non-existent load times. But no matter where you grab it, Bugsnax is plenty of fun and definitely comes highly recommended. In a shit year like 2020, it's important to find solace however you can, and while this wasn't a full-blown solace, I do take some joy in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which was a game I didn't know I wanted, but I'm glad I got it. The first Hyrule Warriors was a perfectly fine game, but not one I was begging for a sequel to, so color me surprised when I was sitting in a doctor's office waiting for an intake appointment for therapy. Yes, I remember exactly where I was. And I opened my phone and saw Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity get announced. On the same day as the Xbox Series S, what a day. But I ended up getting this as a Christmas present alongside Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory, and well, you can guess by this video which one I liked more. I was pleasantly surprised. I had just expected this to be Hyrule Warriors with a Breath of the Wild coat of paint, but that Breath of the Wild aspect actually helped the game out in a pretty big way. I think they actually implemented elements of Breath of the Wild very smartly into the game without it just feeling like window dressing. And I also loved getting to control the Divine Beast as well. That was freaking awesome. Like I said, in a year as bad as 2020, you gotta find some good wherever the hell you can. And for me, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was a nice little surprise amidst all the chaos. Okay, so to close out the cream before the crop, let's talk about it. Cyberpunk 2077 came in on one of the greatest waves of hype I have ever witnessed for a video game, and honestly, Why not? Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk universe has quite a following, and developer CD Projekt Red had just dropped a seminal game in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, so of course there was going to be excitement. I mean, I didn't even really play Witcher 3 back then, and even now I've only played a little bit of it. It's not really my kind of game. But I was hyped when I started hearing things about Cyberpunk 2077. The concept sounded awesome, and the more I heard about the game, the more pumped I got. And then Keanu Reeves showed up at E3 one year and called the dude breathtaking, and my critical thinking skills flew out the window because it's goddamn Keanu. But then the game came out, and yeah, you already know. It was a broken mess. The likes of which we haven't really seen before. I ended up playing the game a few months after it launched and thankfully not really running into many bugs, but at the time I played it, a part of me felt disappointed for different reasons than everyone else. At the time, I felt that even without the bugs, it still would have been a touch disappointing in the sense that it wasn't really as innovative or revolutionary as CD Projekt Red had made it out to be. Now, it's my understanding that the game has reached its potential thanks to bug fixes and the Phantom Liberty expansion, but sadly, I haven't gotten to play that expansion yet, so Still, even if it wasn't the most innovative game on the planet, I did enjoy my time with it, and I felt like it had a solid open world, it controlled nicely, and offered up enough uniqueness from other open world shooters to stand out. I don't even usually play a lot of these first-person open world type games, but at least I was able to get through this one. That must tell you that I had some fun with it. Hell, this is the first game I've ever played where the character customizer actually let me customize my character's genitals. When I got to that part and saw my character's penis just flop about, I really thought I had seen it all. Honestly, after watching the Netflix anime Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which is maybe the greatest thing I've ever watched if you can't tell by the fact that I'm wearing a Lucy shirt, I've had the itch to play the game again, which is why I wish it had a New Game Plus, though I understand why it would have been hard for them to implement. Either way, as messy as this game's launch was, it's turned itself around into being a very good game. One that, again, I definitely got to play at some point. Maybe with the Phantom Liberty expansion. Also, if the shirt hasn't clued you in, watch Cyberpunk Edgerunners. So few people in my personal life have watched it, and I'm like, what the hell? Watch the show. I don't even watch anime, but it's incredible. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. Alright, so on to the best list, and this is where it gets crazy. There's 10 games on this list. Yes, I gave out 10 out of 10 ratings to 2020 games. It was a crazy year. So again, if I talk about these games for long, sorry. If I don't talk about them long enough, sorry. Either way, let's jump right in at the number 10 spot. This one probably won't be anything you guys thought of unless you've seen the last few videos, but obviously I gotta go with the Jackbox Party Pack 7. Okay, the last time I'm talking about Jackbox in the series, I promise. But yes, I hesitate to say that anything happened at the right time in 2020 of all years, but Jackbox 7 certainly arrived when people could have used it the most. The Jackbox franchise saw a huge spike in popularity thanks to COVID and the desire to play games with others at long distances. Because again, it was easy to play, you could play it through online methods like Discord or Zoom. You don't need a bunch of controllers, you just need a phone or a laptop. So it was really exciting, and a new set of games was certainly going to be welcome. And it helped that Jackbox 7 had some of my personal favorite games in the Jackbox series. Quiplash is Quiplash, of course, but Quiplash 3 and its opportunities for Thriplash, where players send in 3 prompts at the end, has created a ton of chaos among my friends and I. Champed Up is very similar to TKO, but with characters instead of shirts, and it's led to a lot of hilarity, again, with my friends and I. I once drew a character that became a meme among my friends and I, and here he is. Party. He's a beer bottle with arms and legs. Someone please make a Funko Pop of my boy. Blather is like a chaotic version of charades that at a point became among the most replayed games in the pack among my friends and I. And then there were my 2 personal favorites, The Devil's in the Details and Talking Points. The Devil's in the Details involves a family of devils basically trying to complete mundane house chores, but since they're devils, you can scheme up and do selfish chores to boost your own point total. Given how communication-based it is, try playing the game on a Zoom or Discord call. You won't hear shit. And then Talking Points is a presentation-based game. You give a presentation based on a prompt, but the kicker is that another player is controlling like the pictures you present, so you gotta play off of it as best as you can. By far, this pack has perhaps the most chaotic collection of games, and it's by far one of my favorites to go back to. I've only played a little bit of the ones that have come after, but this one still remains among the peak of the series. At number 9, one of the games that I was very happy to have in 2020, and I'm glad got to exist, gotta go with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2. I haven't talked about the Tony Hawk series in a hot minute, but you know I'm gonna talk about this one. While Tony Hawk was an absolute staple of the 2000s, the series started falling off pretty hard and going through a phase where it felt like it just couldn't figure out how much worse it could get. I mean, it seemed like it couldn't get worse than Tony Hawk Ride and Shred, but then Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 came along, and I thought that was gonna be the true death of the series. And for a minute it was, but then in 2020, Vicarious Visions came along and said, "We got you," and made the Tony Hawk game of all Tony Hawk games. and then Activision decided to be Activision and absorbed Vicarious Visions into Blizzard and canceled Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4. God damn it. Still, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 is incredible. It's one of those games that just feels like pure, genuine fun and joy from top to bottom. It takes the spirit of the original games but modernizes them in fantastic ways with very fluid controls, incredible level design, and a good challenge without feeling too overwhelming, along with some ways to lower that challenge, of course. And obviously, in classic Tony Hawk fashion, the soundtrack is incredible. I mean, again, if you played Tony Hawk back in the day, you know they had some killer music, and this game was no exception. It's a love letter to an excellent franchise and a game that I'm so happy to see exist, and it helps that it's just fantastic to play as well. Now, Tony, what's this I'm hearing that you're teasing about something new coming out? I'm more than ready. Let's have it. At number 8, another game that Activision published that I'm glad was actually able to exist in 2020. I gotta go with Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Yeah, damn right it was about time. While the Crash Bandicoot remakes in the late 2010s were awesome, there was still one thing on the minds of myself and many other gamers. Activision, can we have a brand new Crash Bandicoot game? And in a rare moment of Activision actually being good and happy and not kicking puppies, they said yes! And they gave us this game, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. And man, do I love this game. It's so awesome to see Crash's classic formula modernized for a new audience here in such great ways, with such fluid platforming and controls along with an absolute boatload of character and personality. And I love the additions of the masks that bring new gameplay styles to the table, and getting to play as Tawna and even Dingodile and Cortex himself was honestly really incredible. Now yes, I will say that my opinion is relatively skewed here because I didn't get every collectible in the game. Having watched my brother do that, yeah, it's quite a kick in the nuts. But honestly, I'm rating off of the time I spent with the game, and even with the challenge that's there, it never really felt unfair to me. It's polished to the point where the difficulty doesn't feel like fake difficulty, which is very nice. Crash 4 was just such a fun, joyful game from start to finish, and it's the kind of game that I'm so glad to see that Activision allowed to exist in 2020. But I'm still not going to forgive them for canceling that Crash and Spyro crossover platformer they were working on as a sequel, because what the fuck? At number 7, this franchise got a new game this year, and this game is very special to me. I gotta go with ASTRO's Playroom. It's crazy to me because I've replayed ASTRO's Playroom like 5 or 6 times at this point, and yet there are still 6 whole games ahead of it on this list. That just tells you how many amazing games came out in 2020 that were very, very special to me. But ASTRO's Playroom was essentially a pre-installed tech demo with every PlayStation 5, except that pre-installed tech demo was basically a proper 3D platformer. Sure, it was only 2 or so hours, but it was honestly the most magical 2 or so hours that you ever did play. On one hand, it's just pure unadulterated fun, a 3D platformer that feels like a loving throwback to an old era of Sony, but with enough modernizations to keep it fun today. On the other hand, it's a great showcase of the PS5's new features, like the fast-loading SSD and the haptic feedback and adaptive triggers of the DualSense. And on the other hand, that just grows out of a weird part of its body, it's basically like a museum of PlayStation history loaded with fun Easter eggs and collectibles that take you through the entirety of the brand's illustrious history. It's one of those games where no matter how many times I play it, I can never wipe that childlike smile off my face when I do play it. And to think that this would just be an appetizer to what would come next in this year's Astrobot game is utterly insane. Don't brush this off because it's a short tech demo. ASTRO's Playroom is fantastic and very well worth your time. At number 6, a game with the exact opposite vibe, going from cute to absolutely brutal and bloody, I gotta go with Doom Eternal. This was a very necessary pick-me-up when it came out, being that it released right as COVID was kicking off. On a personal level, I remember that COVID started popping off in March, right as I was on my spring break in my senior year of college, like I said, my final semester to be exact. And because of the pandemic, our spring break was extended an extra week before everything went fully online, so this came out during that second week of spring break when everything was looking really chaotic, and for me, it was something I really needed. Sometimes it's just great to have a game like this that's constantly at an 11, and is concerned with nothing but letting you have some fun. It's so fast-paced and energetic, and it feels like it takes what made Doom 2016 amazing, but expands on it. Where Doom 2 back in the day just felt like Doom more compared to the first one, at least to me, Doom Eternal feels like a meaningful growth from Doom 2016 with amazing new weapons, improvements to already existing weapons, and an overall greater sense of polish to the level design and controls. And given the ways that the game references Doom 2 so much, it feels like this game is Doom 2 for a new generation. Is there anything I can really criticize about it? I mean, I don't know, the fact that it's so fast-paced you might get a nosebleed? Yeah, that's all I got. My favorite game of the Doom series, and maybe even my favorite first-person shooter of all time. though we'll have to wait and see what Doom the Dark Ages has to say about that later next year. At number 5, another one of the year's most popular and beloved games. I definitely gotta go with Hades. This was a game I jumped on a bit later than others. I hadn't played any of Supergiant's other games, and while I had seen and heard a lot of things about it, and Supergiant's other games, it just kind of slipped past me. I eventually tried it when it came to Xbox Game Pass, and I saw why everyone loved it so much. I got super addicted, and it was this game that made me realize why roguelikes, or in this case roguelites, are so much fun. I've said it a few times about the genre, but I'll say it here since this was the first game I played in it and thus my first real understanding of the genre. Roguelikes and roguelites are so fun and addicting because they're the kind of games you can't stop saying, just one more try. Too. Gameplay loops are constructed in such a way that you just can't help but get addicted, and in Hades' case, it helps that this game is just a masterclass all around, with such fast-paced combat and a phenomenal sense of style that just makes you keep wanting to go back. And even if you're worried about the difficulty, there are settings here that allow you to make it a touch easier, which is nice, and it doesn't take away from the challenge entirely either. This was another game I made sure to buy before it left Game Pass because I just loved it too much to let it go, and it convinced me that roguelites, as saturated as they are great fun. It's a fantastic game, and I haven't gotten to play Hades 2 yet because I have a Mac and not a PC, but let me tell you, I can't wait to. At number 4, another game that is incredibly special to me, I gotta go with Ori and the Will of the Wisps. You know, as many huge games as there were in 2020, I think this was actually my most anticipated game coming into the year. Either that or Doom Eternal, both of which were released really close to one another. Man, 2020 sucked unless you like video games, in which case, okay, it still sucked, but the games were great. And yeah, Ori was one of my absolute favorites of 2020, and a game I liked even more than its already amazing predecessor. I would say purely in terms of visuals, Ori is one of the Xbox One's best looking first-party titles, and from a gameplay perspective, this is a huge improvement over a game that was already tremendous. The combat's even deeper, Ori has far more options and weapons at his disposal than before, and there are so many heart-pounding moments in this game. There's a fair bit of challenge here, even on the lower difficulties as well, and the writing in this game, much like the previous game, nearly drove me to tears. Like, it's a very emotional game, on top of being incredibly fun to play. This to me is just a really special game, and even as the Xbox One kind of slumped as far as first-party titles were concerned, the Ori games were the crown jewels of the console's lineup. At number 3, another huge one that you know I had to talk about at some point, I gotta go with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Wow, this is the first time in the series where I'm really talking about Final Fantasy in any kind of depth. Because believe it or not, this was actually my first Final Fantasy game. For a while I didn't play the series because it was often turn-based, and I didn't play this game because I thought it was turn-based. And not that turn-based games are a bad genre, they're just not really for me. But a lot of people around me were very highly recommending it, so eventually I did give it a shot, and yeah, I am so glad that I did. As a bit of a personal anecdote, I started playing this game on New Year's Eve 2021, and I ended up beating it on New Year's Day 2022. I was just so obsessed with it that I didn't want to put it down. Even having not really played the original, having only just kind of watched it, it's crazy how they took the original game and turned it into something completely different here. And the way that they changed it up was fantastic too. The battle system was just so incredible, and the way the game expanded on the lore and the world of the original game was absolutely insane. And of course, I mean, the characters here are amazing too. I could do what I've done in previous videos and have another moment of me sitting here going goo-goo-eyed at Tifa, but I'll refrain. Wait, I said I wasn't going to do that. Fuck! But it's not just her. All the characters in this game are great and charming and well-written, and the world of Midgard looks absolutely breathtaking too. They really nailed this one from top to bottom, and it's really incredible to see. I'm glad so many people suggested that I try this game because it's truly incredible. And to think this was only part 1 of the trilogy, unbelievable. At number 2, a game you might be a little surprised to see is this high on the list, but I gotta go with Spider-Man Miles Morales. See, a lot of people spent 2020 debating between Ghost of Tsushima and another PlayStation exclusive among 2020 games, and I was the one sitting there going, why is no one bringing Spider-Man Miles Morales into the debate? Now I know, it's basically a standalone expansion to Spider-Man 2018, so to some people it's not quite on the same level, but to me, I actually enjoyed this better than the first game. Even for it being made on the smaller scale, I think they actually managed to bring some uniqueness to the gameplay as a whole, and they made Miles play meaningfully differently than Peter did in the first game. I was also appreciative of this game cutting out those stealth sections from the first game and focusing more on the actual Spider-Man action. And as I said in my 2018 video, Insomniac really shows a lot of love and appreciation for Spider-Man and the lore of the series, and that shows here in the writing, which is consistently fantastic. I also love how beyond the heroics, the story feels very down to earth in a lot of ways, and I love the way Insomniac handled the cultural elements elements of the game incredibly well, what with Miles being a half black, half Puerto Rican kid growing up in Harlem. It feels very authentic, and as much as people bellyache when this stuff comes up, the way this game handled representation was fantastic. I personally almost shed a tear when I saw Haley, who is deaf and speaks in ASL to Miles, and would become a much bigger part of Spider-Man 2. Like, I just thought that was such a beautiful thing. Even for a standalone expansion, it's crazy how much love Insomniac put into this game, and it was definitely an incredibly special way to kick off the PS5's life. But it was not my favorite PlayStation exclusive of 2020, and I know some of you might be, like, side-eyeing already, but I absolutely love the next game I'm going to talk about. My favorite game of 2020. Yes, I gotta go with The Last of Us Part 2. I know, 2020's most controversial game. The one time, literally to this day, the only time that my Game of the Year has been the same as the Game of the Year given out by the Game Awards, and it so happens to be a controversial choice such as this. Some of you are looking at me wondering, how the hell is this your favorite Game of the Year? And the answer is, well, I enjoyed the game that much. The Last of Us Part 2, like I said, courted a lot of controversy in 2020 because a lot of the story's decisions rubbed people the wrong way. So much so that the Metacritic user score is still sitting at a 5.8 out of 10 because it was review bombed so extensively. I know user scores in general are a crapshoot because review bombing is a common thing. Unfortunately, I hate review bombing, but I'm just trying to illustrate how adversarial the controversy got, because at its lowest, that user score was sitting at a 3.4 out of 10. Which makes me wonder how many people have actually played a 3 out of 10 game, because I have. You gotta be a special kind of bad to get there. Either way, between the controversial story decisions and the overall social media response, The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020 was like walking into a minefield that could kill you even if you were somehow floating above the ground. But honestly, back then, and even now, as some of the hate has predictably died off and people have kind of reevaluated the game, which I predicted would happen even back then, The Last of Us Part 2 was one of those games I was coming to love for the same reasons that a lot of people were hating it for. I honestly found the story to be really layered, and it felt like one of those things where the more I went back to it and the more I thought about it, the more I was learning about it and the more pieces that I was picking from it and understanding from it. Yes, it does move in some controversial directions, but honestly, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if it played into convention. I can see what they were trying to do with it, and on a personal level, I think that it really worked. The first game already centered heavily around moral ambiguity, and here that theme is still handled in an excellent way. And I'd also say, as much as this isn't a word to use with a game like this, I actually found playing it to be fun. I know it's not necessarily a fun game, especially from a writing perspective. By the time I was done the game, it did kind of fuck me up for a little bit. But the gameplay was edge of my seat thrilling, the boss fights were pretty incredible, and this is genuinely one of the few games that actually invoked my fear of heights in a way that made me feel genuinely anxious. Maybe that's just a credit to the visual department, who deserves a lot of credits because the graphics in this game are insane. But nevertheless, yeah, it was crazy. You probably know what sequence I'm talking about. It was nuts. I know it's a very polarizing game to many, but to me, it's utterly brilliant, and I can definitely recommend it, so long as you know what you're getting yourself into. By this point, you probably already know some of the controversial elements. The cat's been out of the bag long enough. But nevertheless, I do quite love this game. Good luck to the TV show's producers, though, because adapting this story into Season 2 of the show feels like it's going to be a Herculean task. I don't know how the hell they're going to do it, but I hope they do it well. Season 1 was fantastic. Please let Season 2 be good. Okay, so I have been recording for about an hour, like a little over actually, so yeah. 2020 was a packed year for games, so I guess I'm not too surprised at it, but yeah. What a year. And of course, after a year like 2020, 2021 is going to feel like a bit of a step backward, but we've got some fun ones to talk about in 2021 as well. Until then, though, this was of course all just my opinion on 2020 as a year in gaming. What were your favorite games of the year? What were the games that you played the most, the games you enjoyed the most, whether it was games that I talked about, games I didn't talk about? And for this question of the video, as I've been doing, the question that I saved for one specific video. Obviously, since this was the topic of conversation here, what was your PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S experience? Did you grab them at launch? Did you wait to grab them? What were the games that you ended up grabbing for them? The games that made you want to buy them? Did you skip them entirely and are you a PC player? Or do you just play Nintendo? Whatever your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And next up, I'm going to be talking about 2021, but since I've been recording for an hour already, I'm gonna go take a break and eat before I record the next video, which I'll try to do tonight. We'll see. Either way, stay tuned for that, but until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace. 2020 had Star Wars Battle for Bikini. No, I hope not. I don't know, maybe that's a fun idea. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.